guys, it's Celestia, and today I'm going to be rating a handful of the biggest social media platforms based on how well they work for artists. The platforms I'm going to be reviewing specifically are Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, ArtStation, DeviantArt, Bubblehouse, and Artfol. The last four are actually specifically based on art. They're focused on art, they're art social media exclusively. But all of the platforms will be rated based on how effective they are to promote art on, even if they aren't actually made for that. The criteria I'll be using to judge these sites will be broken down into 5 main categories: user-friendliness, art-friendliness, popularity, engagement in algorithm, and professionalism. Regardless of whether the platform is actually art-based or not, they'll all be judged on equal footing based on these categories. But that said, I do realize that the platforms are all different and have different strengths and weaknesses, and once I'm done numerically rating them, I will be going over more subjective conclusions and recommendations based on those individual aspects. Before I do start getting into that though, let me be abundantly clear that all of these ratings are based on my personal experiences with these sites, and my resulting opinions on these sites. I am in no position to make any objective, factual statements regarding the quality or effectiveness of these platforms. I'm only giving my take on how well they've worked for me, and how well they have, for me, met the aforementioned criteria. I'm sure some of you will disagree and have different experiences, and I am by no means trying to dismiss that or claim that I'm categorically correct about any of this. But all that aside, let's get into the ratings. First up is Instagram. As far as user-friendliness goes, I've given Instagram a 4 out of 5. It's smooth, straightforward, simple, and regularly updated, and I rarely, if ever, experience any glitches or issues with it. I would give it a 5 out of 5 were it not for the fact that it's infuriatingly difficult to use and manage on PC, and while you can browse it on PC, it's basically mobile only. Hootsuite and other third-party services can make it vaguely possible to post to Instagram from your computer, but even then, what you can actually post directly from there is limited, because Hootsuite, in all of its helpful glory, will frequently just demand that you download its app on your phone so that it can send you the materials you tried to post to Instagram on your PC, and tell you to use them to post it from your phone instead, at which point you may as well have skipped Hootsuite altogether and just posted it from your phone to begin with. For art friendliness, I gave Instagram a 3 out of 5. The general image-focused format of both the feed and user profiles is ideal for artists, as sharing media is basically the whole point of Instagram, which makes it perfectly suited for art. It also means that your profile, assuming you only post your art, is laid out very similarly to a portfolio, giving it a professional and easy-to-view look. I took off 2 points because despite how great the whole UI is for artists, the way Instagram forces you to crop your work based on its dimensions is the bane of my goddamn existence. If you're posting one image, you can at least slightly adjust the dimensions, but if you're posting multiple, they all need to have the same dimensions. And regardless of the dimensions that they actually let you have for the images themselves, they're all cropped into squares in the thumbnails anyway, so it almost doesn't matter. At the very least, they could make it so that every stupid little square can be clicked and enlarged to whatever size you want, not the unbelievably limited dimensions they offer or the exact same dimensions for every single image in a post. Next, for popularity, I gave Instagram a 5 out of 5. I don't think that really requires much explanation. It's a gigantic platform with roughly 1 billion active users, and there's an extensive and thriving art community within that user base. For engagement and algorithm, though, Instagram took a goddamn nosedive with 2 out of 5. Despite that huge user base, the algorithm is exceptionally inconsistent and unpredictable. Half the time, even people who follow you and engage with your content still won't actually see it on their feed without directly going to your profile and looking for it, and that's just next level stupid. Subsequently, engagement can be difficult to maintain, assuming you manage to get any engagement in the first place, especially given how oversaturated it is. There are a billion active users, and they do not make it easy to compete with the hundreds of millions of users within them that are posting art. There's a reason that for every piece of art you post, you get 15 comments from spam bots promoting their scam services to promote your content for the generous fee of $30 fucking for one repost of your art to their 100,000 bot followers. They exist because they're swooping in like vultures to prey on the exhausted hordes of creators struggling to get algorithm senpai to notice them. Finally, for professionalism, I'm giving Instagram a 4 out of 5. I can pretty confidently say that in my opinion, Instagram can be one of the most professionally viable social media platforms for artists and creators, assuming it's used right. It looks professional, and while I wouldn't necessarily recommend using it as a portfolio, it looks passably like one, and I have personally hired artists for projects based on their Instagram profiles. In my opinion, Instagram can be as professional as you are. If you're posting your art and then 5 pictures of your cat eating a bowl of corn pops, and then your art again, and then a selfie, and then a grainy picture of a pencil sketch, and then a picture of a sunset, and so on, Instagram's not going to be a professional platform for you. But if you post your best work to your profile and keep it looking like a portfolio, it can be. I've known a lot of artists to find success getting sales, commissions, and even contract jobs through it, myself included. The fact that Instagram also offers stories as a feature means that you can keep your profile itself clean of anything that detracts from the professional value, while still sharing it through stories instead, which makes it even more viable in my opinion. In total, that leaves Instagram with 18 out of 25 total points, putting it at number 3 in the final rankings. Next, Facebook. For user-friendliness, I gave Facebook a 4 out of 5. It can be glitchy and inconsistent at times, like this particularly aggravating issue right now where it'll leave you stuck on the posting screen, and it doesn't matter how many times you actually press post, it'll just stay like that. And then eventually you give up and refresh it, and half the time it did actually post it, and the other half of the time it either didn't post it at all, or it posted it 3 times. They also updated their post manager to have less features and user control, which is irksome to say the least. All of that aside, making simple posts is usually straightforward and easy, their analytics are helpful and very easily accessed, and their publishing tools in Creator Studio offer very helpful tools, which include built-in post scheduling and drafts. They also make it really easy and affordable to boost your posts with ads, and will even let you know which posts are performing best and would benefit most from those ads. Finally, it's just as easy to use on mobile as it is on PC, and honestly, the extensive accessibility and features would have given it a full 5 out of 5 if it weren't for the glitches and the removal of old posting features. For art friendliness, Facebook got a 3.5 out of 5. Yes, we're using decimals now. I am too weak-willed to stick to just 5 whole numbers. I tried, I couldn't do it, now we're here. Moving on. Being able to make a page on Facebook specifically for your art, business, or even online persona that's fully separate from your personal profile is a huge plus. And while it's frustrating that you can't make a page without having a personal account, it's understandable. Albums can also be a very handy feature when it comes to organizing your art, and while I wouldn't recommend using Facebook Marketplace to sell your merch, it's also there, I guess. Photos also aren't cropped as terribly, which means that people scrolling through your page will, for the most part, see your full art as it was meant to be viewed without needing to click on it. It lost points because given that the platform itself is not art-focused or creator-focused in any real meaningful way, while the UI is art-friendly, the platform itself really isn't. Uncredited reposting of art is also a pretty big problem, which Facebook has, in my experience, handled poorly, slowly, and generally ineffectively. Next, for popularity, I gave Facebook a 3 out of 5, which might surprise some people. I realize that with 2.85 billion active monthly users, Facebook is literally the most popular social media platform in the entire world. But I'm not rating platforms for their general popularity. I'm rating them based on how popular art is when posted on them. And despite Facebook's massive size, its main use is for personal relationships and communication, not content creation and promotion. Engagement for groups and pages has gradually declined from the days when all of us proudly displayed the 2,000 pages that we liked and then had to spend full-ass days unliking them when we grew up and realized that it was not, in fact, cool to advertise that you like 25 variations of a page called MCR needs to get back together, or this comment is blue, ladies please form a line. Pages and groups rarely get very good engagement these days unless they're for events that people can share, get updated on, and RSVP to. There's still some value in having an art page anyway, however, if you're looking for support from family and friends as well as older demographics, hence why it still got 3 points. For engagement and algorithm, Facebook gets a 2 out of 5. The algorithm is straightforward and consistent, and you can pay to get your money's worth of a boost within it. But because browsing posts from strangers rather than friends is not really the point of Facebook, the algorithm is not necessarily friendly to artists trying to post and promote their work to strangers who aren't on their friends lists, unless you pay them to. And lastly, professionalism, in which Facebook gets a solid 3.5 out of 5. The page creation feature is specifically tailored to professionals, and the significant benefit of being able to separate your business page from your own personal profile bumps Facebook up quite a bit in this category. It also gets points for the ease with which you can use ads and widget integration to get a damn good click-through rate for merchant online stores. And if you're using the boost feature, you can pick and choose your ideal demographic to reach a personalized, extensive, and diverse audience. Unfortunately, Facebook is no longer a particularly frequently used platform for artists seeking professional opportunities, so I couldn't give it a higher rating. In total, that gives Facebook 16 out of 25 points, putting it at number 5 in the final rankings. Twitter is up next, and for user-friendliness, it gets a 4 out of 5. Like Instagram, it's simple and straightforward and very easily navigated. And it's also very easy to find and support other artists whose work you like and engage with the community. It's also equally easily used on PC and mobile, which is personally very important to me, as I'm sure you've gathered at this point. The downsides that lost at a point are the inability to edit posts after you've made them and the low character limit, although I do understand that that last one is just an unavoidable staple of Twitter at this point. For art friendliness, Twitter gets another 4 out of 5. It offers the same infuriating forced cropping as Instagram, just with different dimensions, but at the very least, clicking the images does reveal the full size, unlike Instagram, and all of the images in the post can have different full sizes. Twitter is also not inherently art-focused, and this is even more of a downside than on Instagram, because unlike Instagram, it doesn't even need to be media-focused. Tweets can be very successful without an image or a video, and conversation and discourse make up a significant amount of activity there. This isn't inherently a downside, but it does mean that art isn't just competing with other types of media, it's also competing with text posts and everything that they can include. Moreover, because the platform itself isn't tailored to media posts, it can be difficult to make media posts stand out or look as good as they can, and they can also more easily go unnoticed within the sea of content, because the cropping diminishes how much they stand out. Finally, this is also a problem, because if you retweet a lot of stuff or post a lot of non-art related text-based tweets, it can be hard for your followers to sift through that and find your actual art, unlike Instagram where it's front and center. That's a lot of downsides for a category that I gave it a really good score in, I know, but that's because the pros are pretty significant. The art community on Twitter is strong, active, supportive, and interacts constantly and almost always positively with fellow artists and art posts in general, discourse aside. Twitter makes it really easy to engage with the art community. And that ability to build connections and network is what, to me, really earns it the points for art friendliness. For popularity, Twitter gets a 4 out of 5. It's a huge platform with 199 million daily active users, and as I mentioned, the art community within that user base is absolutely goddamn thriving. And because of the interactivity of the platform, the sub-communities that Twitter users identify with, like the art community, frequently overlap and interact with each other, which means artists can more easily reach wider audiences from other communities as well. Twitter only lost a point here because of the inherent toxicity of the platform, which justifiably deters a lot of people from using it in any capacity. Twitter gets a 3.5 out of 5 for engagement and algorithm. It's vague and poorly explained. Like, including too many hashtags or including any link at all whatsoever will reduce post visibility inexplicably, and that's not something you're ever gonna find out if you're relying on Twitter to tell you or explain, because that's not gonna happen. That aside, posting and interacting regularly actually does yield positive results pretty consistently. Searching via keywords that a tweet contains, rather than just hashtags, is super helpful, both for extending the reach of your own content and finding other people's content, and your followers usually eventually see what you post regardless of the algorithm, which is more than I can say for Instagram. Finally, it also does prioritize posts with media, so art-based Twitter accounts do have a slight advantage over text-based accounts. As for the final category of professionalism, Twitter takes a bit of a dip with a 3 out of 5, and I truly doubt that that surprises anyone. If anything, it probably surprises people that I didn't score it lower than that, but hear me out. Yes, Twitter has a terrible reputation, a reputation that it has absolutely earned through consistent and overwhelming toxicity and hate. Yes, the professional status that it once had to some extent for creators has suffered as a result. But even so, I can say from extensive personal experience that it is still such a popular, easy way to network, make connections with both your audience and fellow creators, and find work. Looking at my analytics, the majority of my YouTube views come from Twitter click-throughs. Looking at my commissions, I've received more from Twitter than anywhere else. And from a hiring perspective, I and the people I've worked for have consistently disregarded Twitter's bad reputation and fundamental lack of professionalism, and still used it to find artists to hire just because of its popularity and how many artists favor it as their primary form of social media. In conclusion, that puts Twitter at a pretty damn high 18.5 out of 25, leaving it in second place in the final rankings. Next on the list is Tumblr, and I'm sure you're all expecting the tea with this one, and don't worry, you'll get it, even if it happens to rank particularly highly in the first category. So bear with me when I say that for user friendliness, Tumblr actually gets a strong-ass 5 out of 5. And I stand by it. It's easy to post your art, it's easy to navigate, and it's easy to format your posts to look exactly how you want them to. And while it will force you to fit your images into certain dimensions if you're posting more than one of them, it does let you organize posts with multiple images to suit your needs as best it can. And single image posts allow you to maintain the original image's dimensions. But most importantly, Tumblr gives you all of the power when it comes to customizing your blog. You can change every aspect of it to suit your purposes, and make it as professional or casual or cute or modern or whatever else as you want, with almost no limitations other than using HTTPS links for assets. And I gotta say, that's one thing that's always brought me back to Tumblr, even when the platform itself wasn't super valuable or useful to me. Because the ability to make my blog look however I want and include whatever I want is just such a versatile asset, even when the platform and audience is no longer a big draw. For art friendliness, Tumblr drops down to an unimpressive 2 out of 5. If this were a few years ago though, I would have given it a 3 or a 4, but as many of you who are familiar with Tumblr might be able to guess, the relatively recent purge of not safe for work content has dropped it down hugely with this particular rating. Tumblr, a place where not safe for work artists used to be able to thrive, absolutely obliterated their 18+ community by banning anything they considered to be sexually explicit based on stupid as hell criteria. Actually, let me know if you guys want a full video about how Tumblr murdered their own platform with this in the comments, but moving on. To summarize, they banned anything with female nips, despite allowing male nips, or any type of grown-up parts, although they technically claim they'll allow artistic nudity. They don't, though, because they have bots running their judgment system for what qualifies as nudity. And what that means is that if a Tumblr bot sees a significant amount of skin, it'll disable your post for violating nudity rules. That's it. Skin tones. I can't adequately express with words how frustrating it was for this post of Durarara Draw the Squad art memes to be disabled for being sexually explicit. You can appeal the post, and in fairness, they do have a human being review it pretty quickly, and it will almost always be appealed and returned to fully functional status. But one of my Durarara posts was disabled, and one wasn't, despite being posted at the same time and containing the exact same type of content. And the one that was disabled and then re-enabled got half of the engagement, at most. So what does that say about how much Tumblr inexplicably and unapologetically screws artists over? Next, popularity. This may also surprise some of you who don't like Tumblr, but despite the year being 2021, I am still giving Tumblr a mediocre 3 out of 5 for popularity. Which, spoilers, puts it 1 point ahead of DeviantArt. And that's because while I would personally put DeviantArt and Tumblr on the same level of decline when it comes to activity and user base, I still think that Tumblr has more relevance when it comes to support of artists in a current and widespread way. If an artist needs emergency commissions or to fund a project, Tumblr will still often be able to make that happen, whereas DeviantArt will not, in my experience. When very specific criteria are met, Tumblr can still be exceptionally popular and relevant for certain artists and projects. For engagement and algorithm, Tumblr gets another mediocre 3 out of 5. The algorithm is relatively straightforward and consistent, and if nothing else, your followers are always going to see what you post, which, as I've mentioned to death, is a one-up on other platforms. The art community is also relatively active and supportive, and if you can manage to find a following or some degree of relevance, which isn't really easy, it can be relatively easily maintained with Tumblr's algorithm. That said, if you do want to shortcut your way into finding that relevance, Tumblr tends to care vastly less about the quality of your art and more about whether or not it's ship art or funny meme art, which could either be a downside or a plus side depending on your preference. Finally, for professionalism, I'm giving Tumblr an exceptionally generous 2 out of 5. Tumblr's reputation has deteriorated into nothing more than terrible, and is more widely criticized than even Twitter's. That in mind, it does not have a good rep when it comes to pursuing professional opportunities art-wise, even when your art has a good reception there. I'm not saying it's impossible to find any work there, and I know quite a few artists that have. I just personally have not known that to be the standard. With all that considered, that leaves Tumblr with 15 out of 25 points and a 6th place position in the final rankings. The 5th platform to be rated today is DeviantArt, and because I made a whole video about it pretty recently, I'm just going to be summarizing a lot of these points and instead redirecting you to that one for more detail. But anyway, first of all, user-friendliness. DeviantArt gets a 2.5 out of 5 here, which I think is probably actually pretty generous. It tends to be relatively slow and glitchy, and the UI has become unnecessarily clunky and irritating in my opinion. Eclipse also removed almost all of the individuality and customization capabilities of user profiles, which really knocked down its rating here for me. That said, it's easy enough to post your work and it works on both PC and mobile, so that's something. For art friendliness, it gets a 5 out of 5, which probably goes without saying because it's an art-based, art-focused platform that caters to artists in every possible way. I'm not saying that all of DeviantArt's features are good, ideal, or even consistently functional, but every aspect of DeviantArt is tailor-made for art specifically. It gets a dwindling 2 out of 5 for popularity, which I go into way more detail about statistic-wise in my DeviantArt video, so go check that out if you're interested. But essentially, to summarize it, the popularity and activity there have been steadily declining for quite some time now, and the remaining audience, like Tumblr, is quite limited and niche, if not more so. It has a terrible reputation amongst the majority of artists and non-artists alike, and the majority of its formerly loyal active users have moved on from it by now. And if you thought its popularity score was low, DeviantArt's engagement and algorithm score takes it one step further with the bare minimum, 1 out of 5. Whereas other platforms change their algorithm so frustratingly often that it's impossible to predict and understand it, DeviantArt has the opposite problem. They haven't updated it in any meaningful way in a very long time. It's antiquated and unintuitive, prioritizing popular artists almost exclusively, and making it very difficult for anyone else to get any engagement. DeviantArt user King Kaijuice explained it way better than I can, so I'm just gonna read you their comment now. DA is old as fuck, and it shows in a lot of its features. And they've changed very little, to the point where you end up with that massive, unregulated ocean. So as a starting point, assume its algorithm is trash. It worked pre-2011 or something like that, because the community was still pretty active, and full of people dedicated to communication and engagement. The population was growing, but people were actively helping one another, because otherwise, DA wasn't an optimal place to advertise yourself. It was one of the best artist spaces, but compared to stuff today, it was real limited. So as you can imagine, once image sharing and social media became way easier on other websites, the people that put in effort sought out the places that made their hobbies and jobs easier and less clunky. So DA, in all its growing numbers, was left with the lurkers. People who come to interact with their favorite artists, less of people trying to grow a community. So what ends up happening is that unless you're looking at the Just Arrived tab, the algorithm heavily values popular artists with little wiggle room for anyone else, basically modern day Instagram. And because we can't share art from others, the algorithm heavily relies on curious people looking for new artists, which is not a lot of people. And that's why group posting is the most successful way to bring attention to your work here. It's quite literally one of the only few ways, forum posts are another, to put art in front of people's faces, who would never see it otherwise. Groups are basically a do-it-yourself algorithm. Instead of the website finding art in your interests for you, people just need to join groups to find it. But because groups aren't front page affairs, it's still inferior. Anyways, my tip is not to invest too much time into DA. It's good as another piece of the social media pot, but it's not worth it in the end for any artist trying to break through, and the time it takes to get your stuff noticed here can be done way quicker elsewhere. Lastly, for professionalism, DeviantArt gets a 2 out of 5. As I've mentioned a million times, DA's reputation has been shot to shit, and it is just straight up not a reputable place for artists to seek employment or for employers to seek artists, despite its insistence otherwise. It does, technically, have a job section and currency to make taking commissions easier, and I've heard from some artists that there's still a thriving niche community in which a handful of creators are very successful at getting commissions. But it's ultimately just not what it used to be, by far. In total, that leaves DeviantArt with a disappointingly low 12.5 out of 25 points, leaving it in last place in the final rankings. ArtStation is next, and while it's often considered to be a promising alternative to DeviantArt as an art-focused platform, it does not start off its ratings well, earning a 2 out of 5 for user-friendliness. It's not straightforward, it's not particularly streamlined in my opinion, it's not easy to navigate, and while it has a lot of helpful features for artists, it doesn't make them easy to use. That said, it is available on both PC and mobile, which is all I can really say as a big positive here, given how unnecessarily convoluted its UI is. For art friendliness, just like DeviantArt, it gets a 5 out of 5, which is similarly self-explanatory given that it's a platform specifically made for artists that's specifically focused on art. As I mentioned before, it has some very handy art-based features, like the ability to showcase your entire process for a piece, with work-in-progress photos, videos, and more, all within one single post for that piece. It's also notably good at letting you document and promote your art-related projects for others to see and support. Popularity-wise, ArtStation drops back down to a 2 out of 5. It's still mid-range size-wise with 3.4 million monthly users, and while it is considered to be a reputable, popular art platform, its focus is almost entirely on the art industry. It exists primarily to help companies hire artists and help artists apply for industry positions, and it's really only popular for that, not browsing art or artists supporting other artists or getting engagement. Its score does improve again with engagement and algorithm, in which I've given ArtStation a 3.5 out of 5. They're one of the few platforms that are open and clear about what their algorithm is and how it works. and while it has a lot of the same problems as DA's, they've publicly acknowledged those faults and are committed to improving them. It lost points here not because of those faults, as I think that their dedication to fixing those problems is more than enough to make up for them, but rather because engagement is simply not a priority on ArtStation. I honestly think it's kind of a stretch to even call it a social media platform. The community is quite simply not focused on engagement and support, and it shows. Finally, for professionalism, ArtStation is the only platform I'll talk about today that gets a confident, shining 5 out of 5. Professionalism is the whole point of ArtStation, and it's almost entirely focused on helping artists find work, make connections and network, and build portfolios. In fact, ArtStation-based portfolios are almost always accepted in applications for professional positions, and their portfolio feature is definitely a big appeal. In total, that gives ArtStation 17.5 out of 25 points, leaving it tied with Artfol for 4th place in the final rankings. With that in mind, let's rate Artfol next. For user-friendliness, it gets a somewhat harsh 2.5 out of 5. On the plus side, it's basically formatted exactly like Instagram but for artists, making it very straightforward and easy to use. But it's completely mobile only, it's very glitchy, it often lags and crashes, and its 1 post per minute limitation makes it annoying and tedious when you're setting up your profile and posting all of your existing art. For art friendliness, Artfol is the first platform to make me just completely discredit my rating system because I'm giving it an extra point. This beautiful bitch gets a 6 out of 5 for art friendliness. Everything about it is tailored to art, and it goes above and beyond to make sure that's clear. Their category system is easily browsed and helps artists get their work discovered accurately and reliably. It doesn't crop your work if you don't want it to, and its challenge feature is what really earns it that extra point. You can host and enter art challenges so easily, and it's just so fantastic for community building and art sharing that I can't give it enough praise. For popularity, it takes a bit of a dip back down with a 2 out of 5, which is almost entirely just because it's very new and it doesn't have a huge user base yet. But it's growing steadily and consistently, and I think a year from now, this score will probably be a lot higher. Artfol gets a 4 out of 5 for engagement and algorithm, because despite its small community, I have personally found an appallingly high rate of engagement and support from fellow artists there. I've gotten tons of comments, likes, followers, and even challenge entries without once promoting it or even telling you guys that I had an Artfol. The algorithm is actually fair, clear, and reasonable, and artists get a real shot at having their work be seen. Finally, for professionalism, Artfol gets a 3 out of 5. The clean and streamlined UI creates an easily navigated, portfolio-like profile for artists, and it just looks professional. That said, it being mobile only very much limits its use as a portfolio or a platform through which to find professional opportunities, as does the small community and limited methods of interaction. And as I'm sure you can all guess because I already said it tied with ArtStation, Artfol gets 17.5 total points out of 25, and as I mentioned, is tied for 4th in the final rankings. Our last platform today is going to be Bubblehouse, which is fundamentally similar to Artfol in a lot of ways. For user-friendliness, however, it beats out Artfol by a full point, leaving it with 3.5 out of 5 points. Like Artfol, it's easy to use and very straightforward. Also like Artfol, it's occasionally glitchy and is mobile only. Unlike Artfol, I found that it's much faster, doesn't tend to lag, and does not have a 1 post per minute limitation. For art friendliness, since I've already destroyed the credibility of my rating system, I'm giving Bubblehouse an extra point too. Gold star Bubblehouse, you and Artfol both get 6 out of 5 points. It's also an artist-centric platform on which art is the sole focus, and all of its features make that clear. But while it doesn't have Artfol's challenge feature, Bubblehouse instead earns that extra point by offering some super goddamn creative and intuitive ways to display your work. Like, look at this. Look how it lets you format redraws or sketch to finish posts with its before and after option. That's my favorite part. But it also lets you post evolutions, side-by-side images, galleries, panoramas, and more. The way Bubblehouse lets you show your art is above and beyond any other platform, so props to them. Like Artfol though, Bubblehouse also gets a 2 out of 5 for popularity, and for the exact same reasons. They're both relatively new and subsequently don't have huge active user bases yet, but they're also both full of potential, and I'm just as confident that Bubblehouse will, like Artfol, get a higher score a year from now by far. The theme of it being the same as Artfol with these ratings continues with engagement and algorithm, in which Bubblehouse also earns a 4 out of 5. And again, for the same reasons. Just like Artfol, I started using Bubblehouse without ever promoting it or telling anyone that I had it. And despite that, the engagement I got was vastly higher than I would ever get elsewhere. Comments, likes, followers, just all around interactivity with the community that's invaluable to me, and vastly superior to any of the more mainstream media platforms. Finally, for professionalism, Bubblehouse actually beats out Artfol by half a point, leaving it with 3.5 out of 5. It's mostly for the same reasons. It's streamlined, it looks good, and the nature of the app's layout leaves your profile looking like a portfolio. Unfortunately, the mobile-only limitation does keep it from being ideal for use as a portfolio or for seeking work, and it's also brought down here by its limited messaging capabilities and small user base. But because of the extensive options that it gives artists for displaying their work, it earns that half a point from me just for making your art look better and more appealing than anywhere else. In total, that means that Bubblehouse, one of the newest platforms discussed today, actually has the highest total score of 19 out of 25 points and is #1 in the final rankings. But like I said in the beginning, I recognize that all of these platforms have different strengths and weaknesses, so these final rankings should be taken and examined with a grain of salt. Because while Bubblehouse is #1 on this list as the best platform for artists, it's actually pretty low on the list of social media platforms that I think you should prioritize as an artist. While it ranked very highly when analyzed based on those criteria, it's still just too small to warrant it being a viable main primary social media platform for artists. And it's the same for Artfol. So with that in mind, let me push those rankings aside for a second and draw some different, more realistic conclusions. Based on my experience, the top 2 social media platforms that all artists should try to have and focus on using are Twitter and Instagram. They've got the biggest communities and currently offer artists the biggest opportunity to build an audience. Regardless of their specific usefulness for art, the fact of the matter is that their insanely large audiences and art communities can't be beat, and that's something that needs to be considered first and foremost. The 2 platforms that have the most situational value based on your individual needs are, in my opinion, Facebook and ArtStation. I don't personally believe that you need either, but if you're interested in pursuing industry work, use ArtStation. If you're interested in getting support from people you know rather than strangers, or hosting art events, or appealing to older demographics, use Facebook. I think they're both very helpful tools to use in addition to your main social media platforms, assuming they fit your personal needs. Next, the 2 platforms that I think are declining and largely losing relevance are Tumblr and DeviantArt, which actually does line up with the overall rankings. I personally believe that their time for artists has come and passed, and that neither are necessary as a priority social media platform to be focused on anymore. Finally, the 2 platforms that have the most potential here for artists and art communities are, of course, Artfol and Bubblehouse. Both are up-and-coming platforms that have big plans, and the will and the means to make those plans a reality. And I 100% believe that as their user bases grow, they're going to become leaders in the art social media world. And while I would consider them optional at best for artists to focus on right now, I think that in time, they both have the potential to eventually contend with Twitter and Instagram. And that brings me to the end of this unbelievably long video for anyone who's still, for some inexplicable reason, here. Hopefully you guys found this helpful despite it being a million years long, and please let me know in the comments what you think. What have your experiences been with these platforms? What's most important to you when it comes to social media's value for your art? Let me know. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.